AI ought to be able to help businesses derive value from their data, but not all AI applications have a solid foundation. This episode of the Tech Field Day podcast looks forward to Qlik Connect 2025, featuring delegates Gina Rosenthal and Jim Czuprynski discussing the importance of data with Nick Magnuson of Qlik and myself. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where we bring together a group of IT experts to discuss a single idea about key concepts in the industry. This podcast features a variety of perspectives from members of the Tech Field Day community and is often recorded in association with one of our events. This particular episode is being recorded in association with our upcoming event where we are going to be joining Qlik on stage in person, in reality, in Orlando, Florida for Qlik Connect. And if you'd like to come, there's still an opportunity to book your travel for that one as well. Tech Field Day is part of the Futurum Group, and this podcast is also published on our sister company's site, TechStrong TV. So let's talk a little bit about data. Data is people have said data is the new oil, data is the engine, data is all sorts of things. But the truth is that data has been very, very challenging for companies to get business value out of, except now that AI is here. In fact, a lot of AI technology is predicated on the use of data and the idea that somehow, some way, we'll be able to build a foundation of quality corporate data, and we'll be able to leverage AI to get real business value out of that data. That's the topic of this podcast, but it's also the topic, in my opinion, of Qlik Connect. So we shall see as this conversation unfolds, I guess how that's going to work. Before we start, though, let's meet who's on the panel today.
Hello, I'm Gina Rosenthal. I am actually a native Floridian stuck in Austin, so happy to be going to Qlik again. And also happy because I love data, I love making information, and I love all of these conversations and all the conversations we have when we're there.
Hi, I'm Jim Czuprynski. I'm chief storyteller at Zero Defect Computing Incorporated and proud to be a delegate. I'm actually just wrapping up another event that was talking all about AI and data and everything else. With a 25 plus year career as an Oracle database administrator and applications developer, I too, as Gina has said, love data in all of its myriad.
Well, great. That leaves me. Nick from Qlik. I'm the head of AI, responsible for setting our strategy and vision around everything that we do with AI, and then ultimately turning that into deliveries from a product standpoint. Also excited to be at Connect. We're going to announce some really cool things. So, Stephen, as you said, if you haven't booked your travel and you tend to come, I encourage you to do so. There's still time.
And I'm Stephen Foskett. I'm the event lead for Tech Field Day at Qlik Connect. I'm excited to be going back. Qlik is one of those companies that I just love to work with because, frankly, it's one of those. Qlik Connect as an event, and Qlik as a company is one of those companies that really resonates with my belief. Now, I'm a nerd, but I believe that all this stuff that we're doing should have a reason. And that reason should be rooted in sort of value to the business, value to end users, that sort of thing. Qlik definitely has that attitude. And that has been my experience with everybody at the company, with the people at Qlik Connect. Essentially, everybody is trying to figure out how do we actually do things with data. It's not just about storing data. It's not just about organizing it. It's about doing. And for me, that's the topic that I'd love to kind of dive into here, because obviously it's 2025. Everybody's all about that AI, but everybody's also terrified of hallucinations and sort of AI run amok. Qlik proved to us last year, they were one of the first companies that demonstrated to the Tech Field Day community a RAG system that used corporate data and was reliable enough to say, I don't know the answer to that. That's not in my data set. And I was thrilled to see that last year. I was also thrilled to see Qlik surface really interesting elements from the data set that it was fed. And I assume that we're going to be going in that direction. Now, Nick probably can't pre-announce anything here, but let's talk about that. So enterprise data, we've got this great enterprise data. If only we could do something really magical, as Gina would say, with that data. And maybe AI can work some magic. What do you think, Gina?
Yeah, the magical thing is pretty funny, right? Because you see some big vendors showing some really cool things that they're doing with data and may happen to have all the tools. But when you try to do the same things, it doesn't work because your data is not lined up exactly the way they created those products to do things. So I think there are magical things that can happen if you've got historical data from a long time. Even my data, I've been in the business for a while. If I took all my blog posts and put them together, there's probably some interesting threads that go through. Be a great way to write a historical memoir on the evolution of data since the late 90s. But there's also just, you want something good to happen. And if all your data's muckety muck, then you're pretty much going to get muckety muck out of it.
No, Gina, I agree with you. Certainly one of the things I'm looking at right now are things like knowledge graphs and Sparkle, which is something I couldn't even pronounce until about a week ago, much less spell. And looking at the data about the data about the data, so that you can make intelligent sense out of what is still embedded in, what we would still consider to be relational data, right? Because ultimately, oh, look, I've got these great pictures of, whatever, automobile crashes because I'm an insurance company. Well, wait a minute. What's this guy's policy number? What's this lady's, you know, uh, length of coverage and things like that? You ultimately have to go back to, the what we would typically call the OLTP data, the transactional data, like have they paid their insurance bill last month or last quarter, right? So it's really interesting when you're trying to wrap all of that in, and then all the other marvelous forms of data that, companies are using to delve into all kinds of experimental things. Everything from new compounds for medicine to the best design for a fusion reactor, which, we didn't even think we could do 5 years ago. So it's just amazing the amount of data, but also the quality issues of data, right? Why is that field null in 60% of the cases is a real pain point, right?
Yeah, and I'll layer on that. There's a saying that our CEO Mike Capone likes to use that AI is great, but you got to do the work. And I love that saying because it has the connotation that AI is magic, but it's only when you put the work in to get the data in the right place for the right use cases that you're trying to solve for. So, Stephen, yeah, you're right. Last year, we made a big move into unlocking unstructured data for our customers with that retrieval augmented generation solution, Qlik Answers. We have a long-standing heritage of working really well with structured data. So, not to give too much of a clue as to what you'll see at Connect, but like we brought these two things together purposefully so that we can unlock insights and value of all sorts using AI, but predicated on bringing all that data together, all data matters, and providing tooling to make sure that when you're using that data, you have the transparency, you have the confidence because we're showing you the quality of that data and being able to observe that over time because data is very non-static in nature, and so you've got to have all those things in place. And then yeah, AI makes it look like magic, but really you did all the work at the data level to make that happen.
I think
Yeah,
that that's the real challenge, isn't it? That so much of AI, and we've had these conversations at Tech Field Day. We had them last year at Qlik Connect. So much of AI is predicated on data, and yet people aren't doing. I don't think they're doing it right so far because they're not thinking of the data first. They're not thinking of sort of this foundational approach, and instead they're just in love with the magic that these LLMs can generate, truthy sounding, bits of speech. What's the point of that, right? If you don't have data plugged into it, it's not an application. It's just a parlor trick, right?
definitely. I mean, I think that's goes back to, I love that saying, AI is great, but you got to do the work. Part of the work, and I would imagine, well, I know, besides just cleaning the data and get it ready, is like, what is the data? What should we be using? What are we actually going to see at the other end of this big magical experience? What do we hope to discover? So that engineering bit has to come along with it. I'm not sure people are doing that. I mean, I get caught up in it too because it's like, let's go and see what happens. Can't figure out what I want to do with all of these words. And then it's like, well, these aren't the right, I didn't give it the right information to learn from. So let me take a step back. What am I actually trying to do? And how do I want to, plug the right data in to get a better result?
I think it's a great example, Gina. I think it was the father of machine learning said something like, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And I heard an extension of that recently, which was AI always produces hallucinations. Some just sound better than others. And we- it is true from a certain perspective. With a human in the loop, you can get some pretty good sounding things, but I think a lot of times we forget that we have to keep a human in the loop so that they can easily evaluate if that hallucination wasn't too hallucinatory. Does that I'm not sure if that makes sense. And it is actually pretty easy to fool an AI model, even a large language model, to do some nasty things depending on which model you decide to use.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we went the route of grounding these models using brag as a technique for that, because it was really clear at the time. And again, a lot has changed since just even a year ago, that models will hallucinate if given the opportunity. So you really do need to ground them in, um, your enterprise data, contextually relevant enterprise data that, like you said, human in loop. Like it's not going to be perfect every time, but like any AI model that anyone's ever built, it's never perfect out of the box, and you iterate and you refine and you refine. So the human in the loop element is, I think, a very key component to the iterative nature of making AI work for your organization. And certainly, like everything that we do at Qlik in terms of whether it's predictive AI, generative, or now agentic, we have that at the back of our mind that it's got to be something that you can continually refine, maintain, and improve upon over time. Because what I would hate for a lot of people to do, which I do see often, is they're so scared that they don't have the data just right that they never even start the journey. And the truth is, you've got to start the journey somewhere, because I've seen customers where they start building models in the data and the model that they get, it helps inform the data strategy. So they're like almost symbiotic in that, the AI will tell you that these things actually aren't really mattering, and you're still like putting them in reports and sharing them with executives when the underlying factors that are driving the business are something else. And AI has, I think, a great quality to it that it can find patterns in data that you humans are simply not able to do. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned from starting small with these AI projects and learning from them, and then refining and then scaling them up over time.
That was a good example then. Awesome.
Yes, Gina, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Hey,
Uh,
Jim,
uh,
you've had a
yeah,
long career in the data industry. And one of my criticisms as a storage guy of the world of data people is that they seem to be so focused on micromanaging and kind of structuring data that sometimes they forget that it's supposed to be useful. And all of the people now are going to attack me and punch me at Qlik Connect, I think, for saying that. But you know, d- data people have this reputation as really being, having, a meticulous and taking care of it and so on. And then there's analytics people. And analytics people seem to be a different sort of animal. And they're much more interested in, like, how can I dive in and explore this wild world of data? Does that resonate with you? Is that how, or am I completely off base?
well, speaking as a DBA, Stephen, no, you can't have access to that. But it's, somebody once said DBA stands for don't bother asking. But
Oh my gosh, I thought that was just my opinion.
um, thank you, Stephen. It's a joy to be here. One of the things that, we really haven't talked about much in terms of, accessing the data, I think why people are nervous about it also, right, is the idea of making sure that only the proper data gets out the door to where, again, if you're on premises and you're completely in a self-contained uh, private cloud and you have your own models and all that kind of good stuff, you're fine. But again, the DBA in me goes, what could somebody do if someone got, you know, the, beyond the footnotes on our annual report? Or what's the problem with putting out the formula behind our, unique molecular structure for our shaving cream, to pick something, you know, uh, that you normally wouldn't, perhaps a data scientist might not think about that, but, the DBA who always gets blamed if the proper data or improper data leaves the firewall. Uh, that's another huge aspect. And making sure that as we're curating, I like that term, curating data, right? That we've got the right security around it so that not just anyone can ship it outside to say OpenAI or maybe not even internally, right? So there's a lot of things going on in that space as well. So I think that's where some of the denial of you can have access to this, Stephen. First tell me why, is because people have been burned. And, we hear stories every day of something that went out through the firewall they shouldn't have.
Well, that's what I worry about when it comes to AI because it reminds me a lot of that inherent conflict between data people and analytics people, between the world of data. And Nick, Qlik sits right there. I mean, this is the company that has data products, but also has analytics products, and also, frankly, is, as I said, focused on sort of that business value. And when it comes to AI, you're the strategy guy. What do you think of this inherent conflict, and how do you break down, how do you integrate these people?
Well, it is a big topic. In fact, if you look at like the studies that have been done on why people aren't adopting AI more quickly or more rapidly, one is they're still getting educated, and every time like we go from generative to agentic, there's a new hype cycle, and they all feel, oh, I don't know where I'm exactly at. The other one is governance and the fear of hallucinations and of data getting out that shouldn't. And so, Stephen, you're right. Like we sit at the very precipice of that, where we have data products, we have analytics products, and we serve both sides of that fence that you were talking about there, Jim. So there's a couple things that I think are super important. One is from a technology standpoint, building in proper access guardrails and controls so that you can fence off certain parts of your data that you don't want either AI touching or other personnel within the organization touching. And we've invested across both of our product sets to enable that. I also think that something we've started to do and started to prescribe to customers is building AI policies that also govern who has access to what data can be used for AI models, who has the authority to change things in an AI model, what sort of protocols are in place to approve those changes, so that you have a governance layer that isn't just in the technology, but also sits across your compliance. And we have an annual training program where we have to go through that every year just so we understand, those processes. So I think there's a couple different ways we've approached it. Certainly technologically, that's a really good place to start, because if you are kind of putting a stake in their ground that this data is not accessible to AI, that's great. But I think the policies also matter, because then people are held accountable to that as well.
So that's quite the dichotomy, though, right? Because you go from saying, you just got to get started to hearing and kind of hearing that, through different channels on my side too, that people are hesitant to get started because of the hype cycles and the governance problems. So how do y'all how do y'all keep people grounded so they can do both at the same time?
Yeah, it is a dichotomy. It's a really, I think, instructive term for the state that we're all in. So my coaching has always been start small. So start with a very small subset of either a project or use case or set of data that you're going to work with. Typically, that should be something that is well understood. It's data that you know well, you know the ramifications, and start with a use case that has, you know, I would say if things don't go perfectly, like it doesn't tear the business down, right? Oftentimes, I look at those use cases as being internally focused versus ones where you're putting a model and its outputs out in the wild. So, if it's a generative use case, it might be starting with the corpus of documents in your marketing department and starting to work with those where if the solutions aren't perfect, yeah, maybe your marketing's not quite great, but it's also not like, you had a catastrophic data leakage issue where, now you're looking at lawsuits, et cetera. So, but the point is, if you start small in the right use case, you're going to learn a lot from that. Other people in other departments can learn from that. They can start their own small projects. Um, and again, we're all learning at the same time. So I think that that is an important thing to factor in is that you do need to get started, but it's being pragmatic about where you start.
And I thought it was interesting, Nick, that you used the word precipice because we've talked about other quantum leaps before, but that's an extremely apt description because of that. And Gina, like you said, right, that kind of fear gap of, well, what if I do it wrong? And with especially with the need to keep a GPU busy as near to 100% of the time, which is like inverted from the way we think about, uh, any other type of computing where, oh my gosh, it's at almost 100%. You know, it's really interesting that, you've got to show value almost right away when you commit that data and the model and everything behind it, right? The training cycles and everything else because it is so expensive to run most of these, right? And when you get in the 70 billion parameter range, you're certainly looking at a GPU almost certainly, right? So, how does that factor into that? Does anybody have an insight on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I've seen over the last year, and I think we'll continue to see, is more efficient ways to train models so that you can get them to a productive state with less resources. You've probably seen in the news recently, both AWS and Microsoft and others pull back massive investments in these data centers. And you also saw DeepSeek come out, and although they claimed it only took them $6 million to build that model, um, the fact of the matter is they used reinforcement learning for a lot of it. They used model distillation. These are all techniques that aren't brand new, but they made that sort of apparent that it may not require the type of laws of scaling that we were all afraid of for some time, where unlimited compute and then all this data. Like there may be more efficient ways to go about that. So I do think there'll be a tailwind where the cost side of this continues to come down over time. You've got small language models now that are highly performant, more performant than like a generation ago models that were considered of the largest of the type. So I love those tailwinds because it just means as we build on top of them, we're going to get better performance, lower cost, and better intelligence out of them again with the right foundation set in place. So
One of the things that occurs to me, though, you're talking about your precipice here, and you're talking about starting slow. Well, there's also this whole agentic revolution, and that's a little nerve-wracking, nerve-inducing, I don't know. The idea that we would have autonomous agents that are capable of performing actions running without human supervision, that's gotta scare some people, right? I mean, how does a company like Qlik approach the agentic revolution? What's your perspective on that? Because, you have this foundation in data quality and governance, and yet we're about to turn these agents loose. How do you deal with that?
yeah, yeah. I was hoping we'd talk a little bit about agents. We built our first prototype on an agent 2.5 years ago, so very early on, to the point where LangChain was just LangChain. There was no LangGraph. Harrison hadn't built out that product, which is now the major orchestration platform for a lot of these agentic systems that are built. Uh, and I was blown away at the time. Like in my head, I thought, this is going to turn into a network of intelligence that you can orchestrate and do really complex things to solve really challenging business problems. Now, the reality is, yeah, like it scares the bejesus out of most people when they think of, I'm going to turn this autonomous thing loose on AI that I barely trust at this point. So a couple of things. One, when we think about agents, we want to give them very, very specific instructions on a very limited set of tasks or things to do in a domain that is very confined. And this is typically how you would start with any AI project, very confined. That way, you're kind of the blast radius is minimized, if you will. The other thing, and Jim, you touched on it earlier, uh, at least for the foreseeable future, there has to be human in the loop. You can have these autonomous tasks going on, but there's either got to be reporting out to a human, there's got to be human intervention to do something when needed, or just approval, right? And so, you've seen some agentic things come out where they are fully autonomous, but again, they're very narrow in scope. And then there's other things you've seen to come out where human in loop is required. And so, we are building our products in a way in which we understand that human in loop is probably going to be required, probably going to be desired by our users. So, so that they can act and kind of maintain and control what the AI systems are doing.
I think that adds to the anxiety people have about using any of AI. But the idea of agents being unsupervised, talking to each other, supervising each other. I mean, it's kind of how it's been built too. So it's refreshing to hear you know, a lot of guardrails put around it. Somebody talking some sense around here.
Yeah, and I think in some cases you could consider human in the loop an agent within that agent's, multi-agent system, so that while these things may be communicating, rationalizing, and putting a plan together, like there's the human agent that has to say, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. That human in the loop, I do think is, and again, I think there's a very long like trajectory on agents. So it's probably going to be multiple years before we see real production type use cases in place. But again, you got to have that human in the loop so that as we go from the first use case to the second use case, there's an increasing level of confidence and trust in the systems that are being built.
Yeah, you know that you're building them. I feel like I don't know if you think this, but I feel like agentic stuff has been so hyped that we're gonna see something really bad happen, some like really bad implementation of it, and no one's gonna want to touch it for a while. It's kind of what do you think about that?
Kind of like what we saw with LLMs at first, and generative AI. There's been
Yeah.
so many examples of sort of AI face palms. The agent face palm has got to happen, but yet people didn't really backpedal there. I guess some smart people are being a little more careful and cautious, but I don't think the technology has really slowed, has it?
The technology is only sped up, if anything. Yeah, I mean,
Do this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, history repeats itself. Like Gene, I think that's a fairly, uh, it's a statement that has a lot of probability to it. Is what I would say.
That's a very political way to say it.
Well, I hope
Yeah.
it doesn't happen, but I mean, it's just ripe to happen. And I know everybody is a little bit conscious, a little bit about repeating the AI winner, but it doesn't seem like anyone's pulling in any of the claims to make it real and make it reasonable, at least for businesses that are trying to figure out how to implement this.
Well, at least Qlik seems to be aware of the issues and
Yeah,
focused on trying to deliver, maybe a better solution. And I think that comes, to be honest, from this being a company with roots in data and not a company that's just sort of like, hey, let's build an AI playground and see what happens. And then and hopefully that's reflective of the rest of us. I guess final thoughts here. Gina, Jim, what are you looking forward to at Qlik Connect next month?
what I liked the best when we went last year was hearing the customer stories. So, definitely seeing the technology, the new things that Qlik has dreamed up, but like listening to how customers have actually used the products and how they put things together and what they're doing. So it makes everything real. So this is like one way to say, yeah, people are doing AI for real and it's working and here's how they're going about it. I'm looking for more of those stories. That was good.
Yeah, this will be my first time, and I agree with you, Gina. It's the customer stories, and I think it's okay when customers say, you know, we really struggled with this and we had a few failures, but with Qlik's help, we succeeded. And here's why. When you hear those kinds of stories, because it's not all what unicorns and fairy dust out here. It is hard. There's hard lessons to be learned. And yeah, there's going to be failure, but there's also going to be a lot more success, I think. So I'm really looking forward to hearing, some of those stories as well that, we were able to make it happen.
Yeah, and you will hear those stories. So hopefully, you make it to the sessions where those are told. As I described, we launched the Qlik Answers product last year, middle of the year, just after Connect, and now we've got customers up and running. They're actually using it for material use cases across multiple industries. Where for instance, they're using it to um, like a a facilities management company where they go in and they clean a stadium at the end of an event. Like they have a lot of people in there that are putting together solutions to clean things, to put together, and they have to go and look at manuals to do that or have to have been trained on that. And now they can use a solution like Answers to basically say, hey, you know what, I'm cleaning this surface. I think it's this solvent and this solvent. And it gives them like the answer on the fly. And you get these big productivity gains. You get a consistency of the service that they're providing. And those are the types of use cases that I hope you guys can hear about, both from our generative AI as well as our predictive AI, which has been around a lot longer, and we've got over 2,000 customers using that product now today. So yeah, those stories should come out. I welcome you to engage with those customers because they've been some of the pioneers with Qlik in terms of using AI on our platform.
Well, thanks so much, Nick and Gina, Jim. Can't wait to see you in person in Orlando. Before we go, I want to give you all a chance to give a little shout out. Nick, what are you going to be presenting at Qlik Connect? Which sessions do you know yet?
I will be meeting with analysts and media for the most part. That's where they dedicate my time. But I encourage the main stage. We're going to demonstrate a lot of the stuff that's coming out of the R&D teams that I support. And I don't want to reveal too much about it, but like I said, we've had a heritage with structured, a heritage now that we've built with unstructured data. Of course, we're going to try and bring them together. And agents are a big story behind that. So we're super excited about that because ultimately that's what our customers have been asking for is, hey, I love talking to my data. I love talking to my unstructured documents. Can I do it all in one experience? And so, um, yeah, that should be interesting. I'm looking forward to the reaction when we make some of those revelations. Um, so yeah, that's going to be the highlight for me is seeing that come to life on stage.
Excellent. Yeah, and we're going to be doing some live coverage. We're going to be doing some Tech Field Day sessions. We're going to be involved in things. Going to be recording, videos and reactions and that sort of thing. Jim, Gina, is there anything specific that you guys are interested in seeing at Qlik Connect? I know we just talked about that a little bit, but more like the event. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wanna I like to go to the community party because that was really fun last year, and there were really good people to talk to there, so that's gonna be good.
I hear it's going to be at Animal Kingdom this time.
I know, so probably I was talking to one of the other delegates earlier on a call, and, we are also looking forward to going on walks. We did that last year to see the alligators and stuff, so, yeah.
Oh, alligators. Okay.
Well, it's Florida.
Cool. Well, will they be at the bottom of the precipice?
Well, if you need any help with the alligators, I hear that Katie Ledecky is also going to be there. I don't know if you all know her, but she's going to be speaking,
Mm.
doing a keynote session, and I think she can, as an Olympic medalist, jump over them or beat them up or in
Run
some
away
way
from them. Yeah.
subdue them. And we're going to have some other sessions as well, some pretty big keynote sessions, including some customer presentations. So can't wait to see that. Well, we'll see you guys there. Keep an eye on the socials. Keep an eye on the Tech Field Day site, TechStrong TV, this podcast, and we'll have a lot more coverage coming out of Qlik Connect as well. Uh, Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. If you enjoyed it, again, please do maybe think about coming to Connect, or at least check out the coverage from that event. Maybe give it a subscription. You'll find us on YouTube or in your favorite podcast application. And, maybe leave us a comment. We would love to hear from you on social as well. This podcast is brought to you by Qlik, as well as Tech Field Day, home of IT experts from across the enterprise, which is part of Futurum Group. For upcoming episodes, head to techfieldday.com/podcast, view us on TechStrong TV, or find us on your favorite social site. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.